Welcome to Partnerships for Profit, the podcast where we bring you inside the world of joint ventures, strategic partnerships, and powerful collaborations. Whether you're looking to expand your network, find new referral partners, or scale your business, you're in the right place. Let's get started.
Welcome to Partnerships for Profit, the podcast where we take you inside the world of joint ventures, strategic partnerships, and powerful collaborations. In every episode, our host sits down with our top entrepreneurs and business leaders to uncover the strategies behind building profitable relationships that drive real growth. If you're ready to expand your network and scale smarter, you're in the right place. Today, I'm joined by Eydith Kaufman, a seasonal mediator and alternative dispute resolution specialist with ARC4ADR, where she helps individuals, businesses, and legal professionals resolve complex disputes and effectively and constructively. Her work centers on facilitating productive dialogue, reducing conflict escalation, and guiding parties towards mutual acceptable resolutions. Eydie brings a calm, strategic presence to high-stakes negotiations. With a strong understanding of both legal frameworks and human dynamics, she helps parties move beyond positional arguments and towards practical solutions. Her approach emphasizes preparation, neutrality, and clarity, ensuring that each participant feels heard while maintaining focus on resolution. Through her meditation practice, Eydie supports clients seeking cost-effective and time-sensitive alternatives to litigation. She's committed to preserving relationships where possible and creating structured pathways to closure when necessary. Eydie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for that great introduction.
Of course.
That was a mouthful. So you
just a little bit, doing a couple of mental gymnastics here and there. So thank you. I appreciate it. I'm so happy that you're on today. Thank you for joining us.
No, thank you for the invite. I'm happy to be here and happy to discuss mediation. It's something I'm very passionate about.
Fantastic. Well, just to go ahead and get us started, if you could go ahead and describe for us a little bit about what you do in the day-to-day. Imagine you're kind of grabbing somebody off the street and explaining to them.
Sure, absolutely. So I am a mediator. And so what that means is that I'm a neutral party who comes in and helps people in difficult situations try to find a reasonable solution to the same. And so my role is to help facilitate the discussion between the parties and then to help document any agreement that they may reach. And so it's really it's an amazing position because you really get to help and you get to resolve disputes. I've done 28 years as a civil litigation attorney, trial attorney. And so I've seen what, the costs and the risks of litigation and the emotional impact it can take, the financial impact it can take on people. And so to be on the other side of it now where I'm actually helping people solve problems instead of perpetuate them through litigation, and not to say that all litigation perpetuates problems, but, there's a process you have to go through with litigation that takes much longer and it's much more costly. So there's two types of ADR. There's mediation, which is primarily what I do, which is where you go in and you're not making any decisions for anybody. You're not there to say who's right or wrong. You're listening to both sides and then you're helping them reach a mutually agreeable solution. Arbitration is different. Arbitration is a little bit more like a mini trial where you have somebody, it's much more relaxed than a trial. It's much more inexpensive than a trial can be because it is expedited. And so sometimes you'll see contracts that have arbitration clauses and they say, you agree to go to arbitration instead of trial. And the reason for that is because it does faster, typically saves a lot of money, but that is more where somebody is, I would be playing a role as like a judge. I would be making a decision for the parties and listening to the evidence and deciding who I believe and who I don't. I don't do that as a mediator. My role is to stay neutral, to stay unbiased, and to really help facilitate the discussion between the parties.
That's so interesting. So would you say that in general, for this sense of structured dialogue and understanding kind of how human beings interact with each other in these two different ways, does it save the people that you work with, like time, money, and relationships? What is the impact of that you've seen on the clients that you work with?
Oh, sure. Yeah, 100%. I think it's very important whether you want to preserve a relationship or you want to make a clean break and be done with it. It's still important to facilitate that discussion and to try to get people to collaborate. And it used to be back in the day, there was a saying like, oh, if everybody leaves mediation unhappy, you've done a good job. That both sides should be miserable and feel like they gave stuff up. And that's sort of the old school way of thinking. I think the modern way of that the mediators think now is, let's make it a win-win situation. Both parties are there because they want to get stuff done. They want to try to reach a resolution, and you have to just kind of break through the impasse. Not what they're saying they want, but what do they actually need? How do we get to what they actually need to make a good decision and to do something that's a reasonable solution and gets them to move on, where they, both sides feel like, hey, maybe I didn't get everything I wanted, but it was a good decision. It was a good day today.
So sort of leaving the room, instead of feeling disappointed like you've given something up, this transition instead towards, okay, we're both kind of winning something as I'm, exiting here. That's so interesting. Wow. So how do you think that has sort of changed? There's this old school method that's very like, compromise stinks and no matter what, nobody's going to win, to instead moving towards the center of, collaborating over, okay, what can we agree upon? How can we both compromise and leave this happy? How have you seen that shift and change impact the work that you do?
Sure. Well, I mean, the realities of litigation is that things have changed. When I started 28 years ago, there were a lot of trials. And it didn't cost so much to go to trial. Sure. And it didn't take as long to get to trial. And things have changed. It's very, very costly to go to trial. It takes a long time, takes a big emotional toll on people. And so mediation has stepped in and become more important. And back in the day, I think there was a lot of this sort of zero-sum mentality that I'm not going to give up anything and I'm going to go to mediation. And if I don't get what I want, I'm going to walk. And there were a lot of judges that were mediating at the time, and they were very directive in their approach, meaning they would say like, look, you gotta come down, or, you're going to lose your case. And a little more pressure on people, which I think is not as much the case nowadays. I think because of the costs and the risks of going to trial, I think that has changed, and just the time that it takes. I think most attorneys realize if they can get a reasonable settlement, they're much better off doing that. And it's better for their client because, the more money they spend, the more money comes out of the client's recovery at the end of the day. And, it can add up really, really fast. I mean, some of these experts, I've done a lot of medical malpractice, and the experts can be $100,000.
Wow. Oh my goodness. That's so it's really like, sounds like, these people that are coming to you, that they're like being able to meet them where they're at, and understand the realities of their situation. And that sounds like such a different approach than a sort of this, zero-sum mentality. It's very like, cold, sort of removed kind of sense of dealing with people, being able to recognize the full totality of that person's experience and being able to help and guide them through that mediation process sounds incredibly important and very kind of, unique to your approach and the way that you handle mediation.
Yeah, there's a big emphasis on empathy, and empathy is a word that can be a little bit of a hot topic at times, because I think people don't understand it. And I'm certainly not using it in any political type of way. Sure. But I think everybody sort of agrees that the concept of empathy is understanding a person's emotions and experiences from their unique perspective. And everybody has their own perspective, and their perspective is their truth. Yeah. If I am in a car and there's an accident and I'm the driver, I'm going to have a different perspective than the person that's sitting in the back seat and may not have clearly seen everything that was going on. And that doesn't mean that I'm inaccurate or my situation isn't right. It's going to be my truth. And so, you don't really change people's perspective. You don't change their truth, but if you give them the right information, they will change their own perspective and they will change their own truth. So it's really about giving people the information and the insight that they need to change their own minds and make a good business decision and a good decision for their future and for what they need.
Yeah, it sounds like empathy is something necessary when you're entering these rooms where, the very different truths people are experiencing and operating from, and being able to meet each of those people where they are in order to navigate a path forward for open, effective, and necessary communication is no small feat at all.
No. And I think, just personally, I think that being very genuine and caring about people and showing that you care about them and you're interested, it goes a long way. I think it can carry you far. And of course, there's a lot of skills. We take training and we learn, and we're constantly updating our skill set and our toolbox. But I will say, I find a lot of it is intuitive as well. You have to have some good intuition. You have to have some understanding of, when to say something. Timing is everything. There's a great mentor of mine that I took training with called Lee Berman, and he always said the right answer at the wrong time is the wrong answer. So timing is everything, and you really have to structure things so that you're building this conversation, building trust, really having a sense of curiosity and learning exactly why are we here, how did we get here. What do the parties need? And again, what they say they want may not be exactly what they need. So you have to kind of break that down, because there's when we talk about empathy, there's a cognitive component and there's an emotional component. And so, people may cognitively know, like, hey, I need to settle this, I'm bleeding out money to the attorneys, but emotionally, there's some past history and they're so mad, it could be a Hatfield versus McCoy neighbor dispute that's gone on for centuries. And they're just like, I don't want to give it up, And so until you find out that background and you break through some of that, it's hard to be successful.
Yeah, it sounds like, this ability to look at somebody like this very cure person analysis, care of the whole person, of looking at someone as a multifaceted individual with these, conflicting and sometimes, interacting internal elements. It sounds like there's this important ability to cultivate, which is being able to ask the right questions at the right time. How do you feel like you were able to develop that skill? Again, you mentioned intuition, but there's training involved. What does that look like for you?
Yes, so I actually took training with Lee Berman about 25 years ago, I think, when mediation was really sort of first becoming a big thing. So he helped start the LA mediation program, which started sending cases to mediation to see how that would work and see if it would help, settle some cases so not everything had to go to trial. And that's, since expanded, it's become a pretty common practice, at least through California. And it's, in most of the court systems, to my knowledge. And so I think learning that skill, and then I didn't use it as a mediator at that time because I was a new attorney. I didn't feel I had the experience and background. I didn't really know what I was doing. I was still getting my sea legs, so to speak, in terms of, practice. And I didn't understand value of cases, which I think is really important as a mediator. You have to sort of have that understanding of, what is the case worth if this goes to trial, if we're going to settle it today, because the settlement value is very different from what the judgment value would be. And you have to have some sense of that, even though you're not making the decision and you're not telling the parties what to do. I think it's helpful. And sometimes people will sort of ask you like, hey, is this a good settlement? Like, should I do this? And I think you need to be prepared in some way to help them through that process. So it was very helpful for me. And it taught me a lot about how to deal with people and how to approach people in a more non-confrontational and more collaborative way. And so I have been very good at that. I've been very good at settling cases. I've been very good at helping people reach a compromise. And, I had an early mentor, and he said to me, you've made it as an attorney when you can say, F you to someone and they thank you for it.
Yeah,
And,
absolutely.
it's a very harsh example.
Yeah.
The concept, I didn't fully understand it at the time, but I certainly do now. The concept is if you can deliver a harsh message in a way that people are grateful because you're helping them, I think they appreciate it.
Yeah.
And, that's how you help gain respect, and you
Yeah.
help somebody save face. It's not that they're moving off their position. It's that they've got more information now and they're making a better decision.
Yeah. And you're helping them to see the picture in a fuller way. It's helping to expand that perspective of truth. That's wonderful. I would love to hear a story from your experience of where you kind of gave somebody that F you and they thanked you for it. Do you have a specific, example? I'd love to hear of where you were able to have that impact on someone, of being able to widen their perspective in that way, to allow them to see things from a more, dynamic viewpoint.
Oh gosh, well, I would never say after you die.
Of course not, obviously. I'm metaphorical.
and that is sort of, like I said, it's more for the humorous aspect. The concept is there, but I think just getting people more information. A lot of times you have to sit down with people, and you don't want to go to somebody and say, hey, you're going to lose. Like, you got all these problems, and sometimes I see those cases where it's a hard case, and I know that they're going to struggle, and that the odds are against the party, and I have to stay biased, but I do let them know, like, hey, so everything is based on what you can prove, and credibility. So what do you think a jury's going to say about this? The other side says they have X, Y, and Z. How do you think a judge or a jury would view that? And you lead them to their own conclusions about it. And if there's enough problems in their case, enough concerns, they'll figure it out. People are very smart. I have dealt with everything from people that are homeless and struggling to top executives, and they're all smart. I will say, I just constantly amazes me how smart people are, how smart juries are. I mean, you think, are they going to understand some of this technical stuff? They do. They really do.
That's I think that feels like a very hopeful thing to feel. I think sometimes the world can just sort of feel like we get in our own echo chambers and we get in our own experiences. We're like, how can the rest of the world think the way that they do and act the way that they do? And to get to hear this experience of somebody who deals with the inner workings of people in such a, you have to understand how people work in order to be in the position that you're in, and to have garnered that insight over time that, people really are smart, and they think about the things that they say very deeply, and being able to guide them through questions in a way that doesn't feel, I don't know, like you're treating somebody stupid, I think is important. I think that it harkens back to what you were talking about before, about leading with empathy, and that allows you to be able to ask the right questions moving forward.
I never want anyone to feel pressured. You run into you run into the concern that if somebody feels pressured, they may go home and say, I really didn't want to do that settlement, and I felt like I was pressured into it, or I felt like the mediator and the attorney were in on it against me, and I never ever want anybody to feel like that. So I always reassure them, look, this is a confidential proceeding. Everything we say here will be kept confidential unless you approve me sharing with the other side. And so you could speak openly and honestly, and you're in control. I mean, that's the difference. You can go to court, maybe you'll make a little bit more money, but you've got to deal with, continuing on, the risk and stress of trial, the expense of trial. And, there's always risk. I mean, it just depends on somebody's appetite for risk and how they want to approach that. But I think in today's day and age, mediation has become much more popular just because of the expense of going to trial, the timing. The cases just can take 2 or 3 years. There's an upper limit of 5 years. for cases. And while we don't see that 5-year mark coming up like we used to when I first started,
Sure.
There's still cases that are taking 2 or 3 years, and that's after they get filed. So the accident may be 2 years before that. So you're talking about somebody living with something for 4 or 5 years, living with a business dispute. And so you can tell a business person, well, yeah, so you want $125,000 and you're really stuck on that number, and they're offering 50 today. Well, let's say you go to trial and you get 125. And how much is that going to cost you to go to trial?
Right.
Oh, okay, another 50, 60,000, let's say 50,000. And so you'll make 25,000 at the end of the day over if you get 125,000. And for 2 years, you've tied up your company assets, paying attorneys. What could you have used that money for? Could you have made more than $25,000 with that money that you're spending on attorney's fees? And sometimes that will, click the light on and wait a second.
Let me look at this from a different vantage point. Wow, that's such a huge numbers discretion, and when you sort of put it in that perspective, it clearly shows the benefits of really, maybe taking some time to reevaluate things. Certainly. Wow.
Exactly. And I do all sorts of different mediations because I've got a very diversified past. I've done
incredible.
I've worked for a lot of boutique firms. I work for a lot of, some bigger firms. And so I've done everything from contracts to business to medical malpractice to personal injury to landlord tenant, employment, harassment, discrimination stuff, habitability cases. So I've got a pretty good background, and they're all different. I mean, they're all different in how you approach, not just the mediation, but the people and the laws are different. And, with personal injury, medical malpractice type of cases, there's a lot of emotional impact, of course, for most of those cases. And, there's a focus now for a lot of mediators to get into some sort of trauma-based training and to understand that, because sometimes people's reactions, come from that sort of fear and anxiety that they have. Somebody can be in an accident and they develop PTSD and they're living with that case for years and years. It can be hard for them to let that go sometimes because it's been a focal point of their life.
Right.
You have to help them work through that. And so, even though we're not psychologists, we're not, trained in that in any way, shape or form. And we're not there to deal with the emotional impacts that way, but we are there to help bring them up and help people see what may be blocking them from reaching a settlement that may be in their better interests. But that's their decision to make.
Of course. That's such a, I mean, you work with somebody for such a long amount of time, and being able to see this, it's a personal part of their life, and truth and justice are, very intimate, experiences that we have. So being able to lead from that place of empathy is so radically important. Do you think that empathy has been that through line? You've kind of talked extensively about it in your work, and I've getting to talk with you. I definitely feel that sense of leading with empathy, and having worked in so many various different fields, from malpractice to personal injury to everything that you sort of have just kind of brought forward to us. Would you say that empathy is sort of that through line that interconnects all of those experiences in mediation?
I think it is. I think it's a really important key to mediation and to negotiation. It's not just the mediator that needs empathy. I think the parties need some empathy for each other. And that's what you help as a mediator. You help them see each other's perspective. And I should say, it's really important to understand that empathy is not sympathy. Empathy doesn't mean that you agree with the person's position. It doesn't mean that you accept what they're doing, that you think what they're doing is right. It's just taking a moment to look at the world through their eyes, through their unique lens. And that's not easy to do. You may say, well, I understand this person's, upset because I rear-ended them, but I don't understand why they're so upset about all this stuff and blah, blah, blah. It's hard to take your own opinions and your own experiences out of that and say, and just keep an open mind and be curious and say, why is this person reacting this way? Why are they sort of over the top about this issue? What's holding them back? What is the deeper issue here? I like to give an example of, if a young girl's in a minor, fender bender. She gets rear-ended and she's hysterical, and she comes in and she's, got minor injuries, but she's going over the top about, the car and how the car was damaged and all of this. And you think, hey, it was minor injury. Why is she going over the top? But then let's say you find out that car was a gift from her mom who died of cancer.
Yeah.
And that car was the most precious thing in her life, and somebody came along and damaged it. That's going to have a bigger emotional impact. And you understand that going in and talking with the person, then you have better insight into, why are they having this reaction?
Yeah.
Let's work through some of that,
Yeah.
Can't replace the car, but we can, how can we keep the memory alive? How can we work on it? And that's one of the things I like about mediation as well, that I should mention is, you have the opportunity to be creative. When you're in a court of law, you're generally talking about monetary damages. It's just, who's going to pay what to who, what decision is going to be made, or is anybody going to pay something? Because certainly people defense cases and they don't pay anything. Or, there may be, sometimes there's injunctive relief, which is equitable relief, but you don't have a say in what happens. And you're generally talking about moving piles of money, at least in civil litigation or things like divorce, but you've got other issues, right? You've got, how are we going to run the business? How do we maintain this relationship? Let's say it's two businesses that have been working together. They don't want to start over again. That's a big expense to start over again with somebody else. It's easier to try to work those things out and to come together.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. It's so incredible of being able to meet people where they are in that function and incapacity. I think that it's such a difficult thing in our kind of world right now to just feel like we're not another number to people, and to be able to hear from you directly about this, the necessity of leading with that empathy and looking at people as full holistic human beings in order to kind of better meet people where they're at, I think is incredible. Thank you for all of the hard work you do. That's very admirable. I think that's wonderful.
Oh, thank you. You know what? I do really believe in it. I do a lot of volunteer work. I do some, volunteer mediations with the courts. I do volunteer mediation for the community. I really do believe in the process. And I do believe that, helping people learn how to solve problems, and that problems can be solved, and that you can collaborate without feeling like you're losing or giving up is really, really important. And, it helps me. It gives a lot back to me, I think, as a person. It helps me grow and learn. And I would never say I'm a master. I would never say I'm an expert at ADR by any stretch of the imagination. It's something you're constantly learning. You're constantly growing from. You're constantly improving. After every mediation, I always do my own debrief and really try to look at things. I have mentors I reach out to. I mean, there's so many absolutely amazing people in this field. There's amazing people doing work, not just with civil litigation, but, with criminal things and with divorce and with international law, there's mediators trying to solve conflicts around the world that we never even really hear of, to be honest. And, I really, those people are my mentors and the people that I look up to. And I think, it's nice to be a part of that. It's nice to be a part of trying to make positive change.
Yeah. And to be part of something so much bigger than yourself. That's wonderful and incredible. Thank you so much for sharing. It looks like we're actually getting a little bit close on time. But before we end, is there anything that you'd like to plug or share with our audience today?
Well, yes. So if anybody does have any questions or wants to contact me, I'm at E Kaufman. It's EKAUFMAN at ARC4 ADR.com. And Alternative Resolution Centers is just a fantastic company that offers mediation services throughout California. And I'm very, very blessed to be a part of their panel. There's so many amazing people that are with that company. Also, I'll be speaking at if anybody's an attorney, a female attorney, there's a Women in Trial Travel Summit that's coming up in Mexico, and I will be a featured speaker there. I'm going to be on a panel again with some of the most amazing mediators and attorneys that I know. So I feel very blessed to be a part of that. And I'm just, I'm here. If anybody has any questions, if they want to learn more about mediation, I taught at USD as an adjunct professor. And so I love to teach, I love to mentor. And so I'm happy to help anybody out that needs it.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. And just one more time for our listeners, where can they get in contact with you if they'd like to after this episode?
Sure. It's E Kaufman, EKAUF as in Frank, MAN at ARC, letter 4, ADR.com.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
All
This
right,
episode was brought to you by LeDuc Entertainment. If you want to create a podcast or build your personal brand, get in contact with us today. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Partnerships for Profit. We hope you've gained valuable insights on how to form profitable partnerships and take your business to the next level. Be sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss an episode. Got a partnership story to share or someone you'd like to see featured on the show? Reach out to us. Until next time, keep building those partnerships for profit.